al Tnai, and now he's mityahed ima, and he's mityahed, and he mentions the Tnai again. It's only because kinei stam we have a suffix, but if he says it again, right? She'im umasru she'im kodem shebaal mityahed ima b'feirush al Tnai harishon, einat tzricha get. The Tnai is tofes. Okay? So this is the flip side of the Meiri, right? What does the Meiri say? The Meiri says that the problem is that the Kiddushin was a long time ago, and it was a year ago, and now he didn't say anything. But if the Kiddushin was right now, and then we go from it's all under the chuppah, and we go from the chuppah, and the chuppah is also nisuin, right? So it's basically it's almost simultaneous, right? And according to the shittas that the Badekin is the chuppah, and we talked about this, and you can have the chuppah before the Kiddushin, right? So of course the whole thing is al Tnai. That would be an interesting thing, because if you say that, then the chuppah is before the Kiddushin is an ongoing situation. So then there's the Tnai b'shat nisuin.
Is the cheder yichud on a very practical level that sufficient for the chelkat mechukak, or it has to be
for what?
For the chelkat mechukak, would the cheder yichud be sufficient, or it has to be before they actually do be'ilah, and it has to be before they go into yichud?
He says nityached ima. Not clear. I know, I understand the question. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what we think about that. Okay, so that's a halach l'mais, is a very important point.
Right.
That if the Kiddushin and the Nisun are happening together, or even if they're separate, and he mentions it again, mentions the Tnai again, so then the Tnai is chal. It's only because kinei stam. That's already pshat in the Gemara. Okay. So that's a second case where, despite the fact that you have the issue of ein adam oseh bilato bilad znut, there's a bigger. He says he wants the Tnai, so it's not ein adam oseh bilato bilad znut is not chiseled in stone. If he says this is l'shem bilad znut, so you can right, you can imagine. Okay. Okay. If you look in terms of when he would have to say it in order to eliminate the chashash of bittul atnai, you go back to the first page here, Hagot Ashri. Okay, there's a marach or zarua, I think, right? V'chein pasak marich v'chein hamikadesh al tnai. Afa pishet neima b'shat bi'ah. Afilu hachi tzricha get himenu. Even if he says b'shat bi'ah, he says the Tnai. U'mistama Tnai, why? Mistama Tnai lo haya rak mishum k'tuba. Right? He says Har'el mekudeshet li, that Har'el makes a Tnai, but it's only, because of ein adam oseh bilato bilad znut, he wants the Kiddushin to be chal, and he wants the bi'ah to be a bi'ah Kshera. So what's he making the Tnai for? He's making the Tnai for Mammon. You should know that if you have Nidarim Alayich, you don't want to have to pay the Ksuba if I'm Megarish you. Okay? But he says, Umiyu, im Piresh Behedya, Shelo Tehei Biat Kiddushin, Afilu Linyan Get. He says, no, I want this to be, if the Tnai is not fulfilled, this is a Bi'ilat Znut. He says that. Okay? He doesn't want it to be a biat kiddushin. Afil inyan get im lo yitkayem atnai v'kafle letnai kedin atnai einat tzricha get. Okay, so the question of how explicit you have to be. But if he says it as they say, it's almost the parsha, right? The rachel bitra ktana, right? If he says this, if the Tnai, I'm making this Tnai, if the Tnai is not fulfilled, this is a bilat znut. There's no kiddushin, it's bilat znut. Then that's the Tnai. The Tnai is Kayam. Okay? Okay. Let's take a look at the Or Sameach. The Or Sameach, and the Tshuva here. The Or Sameach is reacting. There was the history of this, of trying to make a Tnai. What? It's page 8.
Oh, you sent another.
I sent another one, yeah. Okay. You got it though, right? You just didn't print it. Okay.
I didn't remember.
Okay. So he says, okay. So the Rabbanim in Paris, I don't know, about 80 years ago, they wanted to come up with a Kiddushin al Tnai, which was that if the woman gets a civil divorce, then the Kiddushin are betelin l'mafreya, and then the husband doesn't want to give the get. The civil divorce is sufficient to that should the Kiddushin be batel l'mafreya. So the whole rabbinic world went bazudis when they came up with that, and on this, I think rightfully so, is that basically it said it was an excuse. It was basically saying we'll do civil divorce. We'll allow civil divorce. Whereas if they get a civil divorce, so then the Kiddushin will betelin l'mafreya, right? So that everybody went crazy, and the Or Sameach here, Meir Simcha Midvinsk, he says, Hinei lemi lefi michtavam nimtzaim anashim. He doesn't call them rabbanim, right? Nimtzaim anashim asher lemiut iskam b'talmud. He calls them amoratzim, right? He's saying that these people that that never learn Gemara, right? Yirtzu lasot kol hachupot al tnai ubema ba'ofen she'ima isha telech le'erkaot v'tasig get pturim mehashofet az yafkiu l'mafrev v'yeh kechol hagoyim beit Yisrael. That's how he understands. He understands it's like the reform, right? Yeh kechol hagoyim beit Yisrael asher dinei b'nei Noach meforashim b'Yerushalmi kiddushin dehu megarsha ohi megarashto. B'nei Noach have it, right? In B'nei Noach they can be megarish each other. That a Tnai yasu l'nimus. The Tnai would just be this ritual thing, right? Asher hakol yodin deha'arama hizo. Okay, so he...
morally offensive.
What?
That would be really morally offensive if it was just like either person could the other.
Well, no, he's saying it's Dinei B'nei Noach. No, he's not doing that. If that was the halacha, that would be the halacha. That's not the halacha. That's B'nei Noach. So he's saying basically they want to basically do whatever. He even has this, he gets a little polemical here. He talks about it, instead of saying Kedat Moshe Yisrael, it'll be Kedat the new Republic of France. Right? So he says, what was the point I wanted to show you here? So in attacking this, he talks about the fact that the Tnai is batal afterwards. So they had this idea to actually institute a Shavua, right? That they wouldn't be a bittul Tnai, right? So he says, She'ena. Okay. So hine gam lefi dimyonam kvar katvu sheze bilti efshar she'eno b'nimus v'derech eretz sheyitnu tekef b'shat be'ilah lifnei edim sheyatnu. Right? How can you say this? Right? What do you want to say? You want to say that they have to make that he's going to have to make the Tnai b'shat bia again. So what are you going to do? Just think. He's saying, just picture this. People are going to get married. They'll do a Tnai under the chuppah, right? And then b'shat bia will get edim, right? The edim are going to be outside the bedroom, and then he's going to have to say the Tnai again. That's not derech nimus, and it's not derech tzniut. What are they talking about? They'll never do such a thing, right? V'nimtza dahava kines al Tnai u'ba'al stam da'aminan ein adam oseh bilato bilad znut u'tzricha get minat Torah. Okay? V'gam kevan shelo yishav'u amrina da'al bilot acherot ein adam oseh bilato bilad znut. Not only this one, but every bi'ilah afterwards you say adam oseh bilato bilad znut, right? V'af im yishav'u gam kein yidu'a lanu kalut hayeladim u'bnei hador hachadash be'isur shvuah b'dvarim shebeino levein kono. Even if they make them take a shvuah that they'll never be mekadesh bebia, make them take a shvuah, but they don't take the shvuah careful. They don't take the shvuah seriously. But look, he has to make them from also. But they still care about ein adam oseh bilato bilad znut, right? So this is what he says. V'ishtakach tu ein adam oseh bilato bilad znut. V'hach de'ein adam oseh bilato bilat znut, Pirashti, right? The lav mishum chomer ha'isur de bilat znut amru. The davar zeh kalu bizman hazeh lepritzei ador. Right? When did he write this? The 20s, the 30s. Rak kevan sherotzeh, but what? So ein adam oseh bilato bilat znut is actually also important. It's also connected to the tshuva of the Sridei Eish, which we'll see. Is not because of the chumrah of the isur. It's because people want to be married. Right? Rak kevan sherotzeh be'ishuta, etc., etc. So you still have ein adam oseh bilato bilat znut. Okay? So the point is that according to the Or Sameach, it's not sufficient what the Hagot Ashri says, that b'shat biyah they should make the Tnai again. Even though that's problematic, is how you're going to carry that out. It gets a little messy, right? But let's forget about that problem. Suppose you did that, right? He says every subsequent biyah you have that problem, and you say, okay, let them be nishba. You don't trust the shvuah. Okay? So look, you could say that you're not choshesh for every subsequent biyah. Once they set it down that they want the Tnai, then after the first time, then they wants the Tnai, right? But he thinks that ein adam oseh bilato bilat znut is something that comes up in every biyah that they have. Okay. Okay.
Would this be dependent on how you understand nisuin? If you go back to the, presuming that he's not following the Rashba, and this is the issue here is that through the act of nisuin you're demonstrating mechila tonight. That if what you're doing is showing Chai Ishut in a general way, then through the subsequent biyah you're showing a life together. That's sort of an expression of nisuin. If it's nisuin is the sort of kinyan act that complements the Kiddushin, then
you might be showing nisuin, but you're showing nisuin as a suffix.
I'm not saying it has been, saying you can sort of see how a certain perspective on, if your perspective on nisuin is a sort of more formal thing, then it's harder to make the argument he's making.
I see what you're saying. Right.
As opposed to it's a sort of continued demonstration that they're living.
No,
living
you're choshesh that if you're choshesh every time, it's the Maisa, it's a Maisa Biyah, it's Kiddushin. Forget about Nisuin. It's Kiddushin.
It's harder to say they have kavanah. I guess that they don't spend so much time.
Because ein adam oseh bilato bilat znut, there's enough kavanah. And the kavanah is that the ishut should be ishut, it should be a biyah of ishut.
But he acknowledges that their kavanah is only for general life together and has nothing to do with halacha. So that's why it would have to be.
It's not they don't care about the isser. They care about being married.
Right, but they don't care about the mas and nisuin.
They
care
want
about
to put it in a positive light. The Sridei Eish talks about the same phenomena, but he talks about it in a positive light. That it's a moral thing. It's not even people who aren't from. They care about it in the oseh bilato bilat znut. So therefore, if you have a couple, this is the question of civil marriage. You have a couple, they live together, right? Or they do get married civilly. They want to be married.
Right.
So you also say ein adam oseh bilato bilat znut. They can be mechal Shabbos, but still, then ein adam oseh bilato bilat znut. They want to be married. Right? They want a family. They want to have standing in the community. Those are normal things. There's nothing to do with frumkat. Right? It used to be normal. Okay. All right.
Are we going to learn that tshuva this week?
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about a different case where perhaps we don't have the chashash of ein adam oseh bilato bilat znut. And this is if the Rabbanim of Paris wanted to come up with Kiddushin al Tnai because of civil divorce, and that was roundly rejected. What we do have is a story in the Gaonim, which made it into the Shulchan Aruch, and there's Tshuva the Chumas Hadeshen, that they used to be Mekadesh al Tnai, that if the husband died without children and the woman fell for yibum to the brother-in-law, and the brother-in-law was a mumar, so there was no way she was ever going to get. We don't want her to be mityabim to the mumar, and he probably won't give chalitza or yibum. So the kiddushin should be batal mafrei. So we have here. Kataver of Shrira Gaon, it's on page 2, right? This is from the tour in Siman Kufnun Zayin. Okay? Kataver of Shrira Gaon, Nafla Lefnei Mumar. Kevan shehoratov leidato b'kedusha, zkukali liyibum, umitagna ad chalitzla. Okay, since the mumar is Jewish, right? Chata Yisrael, afpisha Chata Yisrael, who, right? So he's Jewish, and need yibum or chalitza. So we're up a creek. Rav Yehuda Katav, Ika. This is Rav Yehuda Gon. It's the Bahag. Ikad Nasba Bala. If when she got married to her husband, Havi Yavam Mumar. At that time, the brother of the husband was a mumar. Lo by chalitza minei. Doesn't require chalitza. She doesn't require chalitza from him. Ve'im haya habal mumar ve'yoshevet tachtav umet behamroto below banim einat tzricha yibum daha lav achivhu ve'ein zakuk la chalitza ad kan. That's the Bahag. That's Rav Yehuda Gon. That if the brother was a mumar at the time they got married, then there's no need for yibum. Okay? V'lo yadana, this is the Tur speaking. V'lo yadana lama lo tieh eshet mumar zkuka liyibum. V'gam machiluk ben yesh machiluk yesh ben im haya yavam mumar k'sheniseit or lo. I don't know what's going on, what he's talking about. Okay, so what's the rationale? The rationale is that it's a Tnai. This is more than a Tnai. This goes back to the Tosot that we said. There's certain things, normally we say Dvarim Shebeleven and Dvarim, right? But certain things we say Anan Sahade. Anan Sahade, if the guy was a mumar then and she knew about it, so Anan Sahade, she never got married to this guy. She would not have accepted, because this guy, had he died without children, then she'd wind up worrying about this brother who's a mumar. She doesn't want to be married to a mumar, and she doesn't have to run after a mumar in order to get chalitza. Okay. So that's an anet sahadi, without a tnai. That's the rationale. Okay. Katuv b'trumat hadeshen. This is Beit Yosef. Yesh noagim lahatnot b'shat kiddushim shelo tizakek liyibum im tipol lefanav. All right.
That doesn't explain the flip case of if the husband's a mumar.
No, because if the husband's a mumar, then you can't say anan sahadi. She doesn't want to live with a mumar.
No, but the husband's mumar, she also isn't zakati, no?
Right, but that's for a different reason, because there's a mumar, so it's like a guy, so we just dissolve the marriage. Okay. Okay. So the possibility came up to do a t'nai like this. Okay, and then the question is, of course. But there was chuppah afterwards, and there was Kiddushin afterwards, right? So why isn't there, why isn't it Tnai v'kinsa stam? And maybe, right, so how does that work? So he says, the Beit Yosef, if you continue down a little bit, v'ha'idna, 3 lines to the bottom, regilim laso Kiddushin v'nisun yachad b'shat chuppah. V'kevan bahi shata matneh anisun nami matneh. Same idea that I quoted to you from the Meiri. The whole problem of if you make a Kiddushin al Tnai and then Kinsa Stam is because the Nisuin happened much later and they didn't say anything. So then you think because there was Mochel Tnai. But today, time of the Beit Yosef already, they did the Kiddushin and the Nisuin together. So if you did the Kiddushin al Tnai, it relates to the Nisuin also. And Nisuin nami matneh. Okay? That's one point. That's important. And that contravenes because we know that he was matneh. If you look at the Darkei Moshe, alright, so the Beit Yosef is cholik on this, and the Shulchan Aruch actually is against this. Okay? The Darkei Moshe says, Umahari Berin Katav, Afa pi she'ein lahatnot shelo teis zkuka liyibum. If they make a t'nai b'shat kiddushin, a t'nai that she shouldn't be zkuka liyibum, that is matna mash katuv b'Torah. The Torah says that there is yibum. You're going to say you want kiddushin without yibum, you can't do that, right? So that's t'nai batel u'maseh kayam. That means she's mekudeshet, and if the situation arises which requires yibum or chalitza, then they require yibum chalitza. דאבי כמעט על מה שכתוב בתורה, מכל מקום, אם מקדשה בתנאי כפול, שלא תהא מקודשת, אם תיפול לפני יבם, right? that you will מבטל לקידוש למפרע, שפיר דמי, ואם בפסקי מהראי, that's the Trumas HaDeshen, right? איזו נקרא משומד, right? How you define what a mishumad is, okay? Okay. So they allowed for the Tnai. Okay? And again, you have this issue of, but there was Kiddushin afterwards. So if you go with what the Beit Yosef says, right, the fact that you did the Nisuin right after the Kiddushin, it's as if you Piresh, Bishat Kiddushin also, it's not Stam. They obviously did not require every time there was Bia to say it again. Right? Right, no? No. They didn't require it, right? Okay. 1 second. Here, he says again, then he goes, go down here a little. Gam ma shekatav. See? In the Bach. Gam ma shekatav, Badot Mordechai l'sham, כמו השגה, ממה שכתבו התוספות, דווקא מן האירוסין, דלא היה לו ממנו שום טובה, אמרינו נדאית אפילו קידשא נפשה. אבל לא במן הנישואין, נראה לי דעתי, right, if there was נישואין that she was מבטל the Tnai, because the Tnai לטובתה, דווקא במוקשכין, איקה למימר היי סברה, that סברה וקיבלה. Right? If she found there was a mukashchin because of Tavamet of Tandu, Tavamet of Armalu, right? So therefore, she's still a Kudeshet. Aval b'mishumad hadat notenet she'ena machneset atzma b'shum safek machmat chibat ba'ala va'af min hanisuin. Right? In other words, even though there was nisuin, she wants the Tnai still to be kayam because it's better to have to risk bilat znut than to have to worry about getting chalitza from a meshumad. Okay? Mukashchin, she's makabel. Right? Love is blind after nisuin. Right? But for the brother-in-law, love is not blind. There's no love to be blind. Right? So that's a different story. Okay? So this is again, it goes to what type of Tnai are we talking about? Let's look at it that way. We have on the one hand, which applies to the woman as well as to the man. Right? But mitzad sheni, where there are these terrible repercussions. So she's willing to live with that risk in order to have the Tnai. Another aspect of this is in the continuation. He says, Velo kasha, 3 lines from the end, on page 4, on the top paragraph, three lines from the end of that paragraph. The last word on the line is Be'ilotav. Agree with me? Velo kasha, what? Towards the end of the line. Velo kasha, im kain Be'ilotav lemafreya havim be'ilot znut. Right? Kedita lahedya perka sholeach, perka isha rabba. The kamishani in Shavua Rabbana lebilato bilad znut. When you say Afkinu Rabban Kiddushin Minei, Kol shekain keshuhu matne beferush shelo tehei mekudeshet im tipol lifnei yavam. The letan lemechash lebilad znut kevan de b'shat biyah lo nitkaven leznut. What defines bilad znut? At the time they're married. Right? It might be that the mafreya they won't be married, but at the time they were married, so there's no kavanah there for bilad znut. Even though retroactively we can define the act as a bilad znut, but that does not make it as a bilad znut. At the time it wasn't a bilad znut. It's like a time warp, right? You redefine something with mafreya, but at the time the dot of the person was not for bilat znut. Ein adam oseh bilato bilat znut. Because he doesn't, at the time that he's having relations, he wants it to be relations of ishut. That's what it is now. Afterwards, you'll change it, you'll redefine it. That doesn't change the chazaka. Right? So that's another reason why, b'chol zot, it should apply. So why don't we say this every time? Because this Tnai will only be Mekuyam after he dies. Right? It's not like Al-Menachi Yitza Abba. So now I'll find out the Abba Lo Ratza. So now it's Bilat Znut. So there's these, I'm looking at this woman, we had a relationship, and now I'm saying it was a Bilat Znut. No. In this case, while we're married, and we have a relationship, and it's not, I don't have in mind to be Bilat Znut. If the husband dies without children, and the brother's a Meshumid, then she was never married to him. But he's dead. So the Bilat, he died b'sheket, in a sense, right? So it wasn't the Bilat Znut. He's dead already. Was he care if the Bilat Znut or not? Okay? So there are situations where you don't say, Ein Adam Osa Bilato Bilat Znut. Okay? Now he has another... he actually talks about the need for being mat down every bia. You'll see here. But now the next point is, why isn't it a bilat znut? He says, there's different considerations. This is very important. V'chol ze yesh li hashev, the ein domet tnai ze l'shar tnaim. The tnai for to get the woman out of a situation of yibum chalitza. The kaven da ha'avonot garmu l'gzerot shenitma'u ben hagoyim im kein mutal aleinu l'takein shelo yit'arvu yoter ben hagoyim ki mi yirtze l'tchatein im zeh, should be im zo, al safek shetit'agein, shetit'agein kol yameha. So someone has a brother who's a meshumit, so nobody want to marry him. Right? Because he has a brother. It's not like, the wisdom, he has a brother-in-law Meshumit. Like, it could be like a story from, they can make an Israeli movie out of it in Bnei Brak, right? So if the brother is a Meshumit, so she's afraid to marry him because maybe he'll die, they won't have children, and she's going to be nofelet l'fnei ha-Meshumat, right? So now this guy, his brother's a Meshumit already, and no Jewish girl is going to marry him. So who's he going to marry? He's also going to look for a nice Goyish idol, right? So we want to prevent that. We want this guy whose brothers are Meshumid, we want him to be able to get married, right? So we want to be able to guarantee that any woman he marries won't be no felet liyibum in front of the brother. Okay, so those type of extenuating circumstances, type of things you have to absorb when you talk about circumstances today. Okay, if you have any analogous pressures. Okay. Im kein mutal lenu takein shelo yit'arvu yoter ben hagoyim ki mi yirtze l'tchatein im zeh al safei shetit'agein kol yameha v'yidei kach yelech v'yisa nochrit v'yitma ben hagoyim. So that he'll do what his brother did, right? Lefichach lo nikra ze lechatchila elet kamo b'diavad hu deme'achar de'achiv meshumad tzuchim anu l'takein lezeh she'isa Yisraelit. He's already what's called noar b'sikun. Right? He's in danger of marrying a non-Jewish woman. His brother's a Meshumit already. Okay? So we want to make sure he marries a Jewish girl. V'gam lo nikru, now listen to this. So that was sort of making the whole situation b'diavad. He says, V'gam lo nikru bilotav bilot znut. Sharei hi ishto umiyuchedet lo kol yamav. V'havyu lemafreya, listen to this, kipilegesh disharya. V'lo nikra bilat znut. V'od de'iyu vada boel l'shem nisuin. Okay, he's saying two things here. First of all, there's a halachic argument, and this goes back to our whole discussion of pilegesh. Right? What's the bilat znut here? It's panuya bala pnuya. So since the living in him is, so even if you say panuya bala pnuya without kiddushin is bilat znut. But here, at the time, as far as they know, there is Kiddushin. So they are living together in a Mizgeret, which is not Bilat Znut. The most will be, it's Pilegesh. So if you took away the Kiddushin, but they're still committed to each other, that's what a Pilegesh is. So it's not a Bilat Znut, even if you're Mevato the Kiddushin L'Mafreya. And then he says, V'od, let's suppose you don't like that halachic argument, you want to hold like the Rambam. says, "Va'od de'iu vadai boel l'shem nisuin, ela de'i rotza bekach shela'achar moto im tipol lifnei avam shekol belotav l'mafreya shelo l'shem kiddushin v'adaita dahachi nitkadsha v'niseit lo aval iu gufei vadai b'shes bia boel b'li shum Tnai." So he's boel l'shem ishus. It's her thing that if he dies, right? So again, since it's after he dies, right? So there's no issue of ein adam oseh bilato bilatznut for a number of reasons. Now, the question is, does this apply in a case of if you make a Tnai not for yibum, but if you make a Tnai for if the husband acts in an unbecoming way? Will that would be mevatel the Kiddushin l'mafreya? Do you have there also ein adam oseh bilato bilatznut? So if you go with the Pilegish argument that it's just like Pilegish fundamentally is mutar, so then maybe you do away with the whole problem of ein adam oseh bilato bilatznut. See that? Because it's the whole time that they're married that they were together. Right? In terms of the types of argument, the type of Tnaim, and this we'll summarize with this, is that if, one second, this may be true if you're talking about Yibum, right? But if you talk about the Tnai of the rabbis of Paris. So they're basically saying if she gets a civil divorce, then the Kiddushin is batel l'mafreya. So that already is much more like a bilad znut. You're saying you're doing away with Kiddushin. You don't want Kiddushin. And you just want to make it talui in civil divorce, right? But you're doing this funny trick that you don't really believe in, right? But if you say that it's not talui in the shofet, right, which is what the takana of Paris wanted to do, but you go to the takana of Chachmei Constantinople, which was after that, they wanted to say something which was more reasonable, which people took more seriously. Namely, if the husband acts in an unbecoming way, it's not that you're moser the halacha or all of Even Ezer to the French magistrate, right? No, it depends. The Gittin Kiddushin depends on us. But what you want, this is what Rav Eliezer Berkowitz points out in the last thing that I gave you. But here you're saying you're making it totally the husband. That if the husband doesn't live into the husband's actions, if the husband doesn't live up to his marital obligations, if they're separated anyway, and he refuses to give mizanot, and he refuses to give a get, etc., then the Kiddushin is batel mafreya. Okay? So it's not that the shoftim decide. It's the Eshut is dead anyway. He refuses to live up to his obligations. He's trying to extort. So then the Kiddushin is batel mafreya. That's a different story. That's different already. Okay? So that's a type of takana. What?
Sorry. That would only be in certain circumstances of divorce.
Right. Depends how you formulate the Tnai. So if you take a look in the Aruch HaShulchan, this is the last thing we'll do here now. In the last page. What's the last page? Hold on. Not the last page. This thing, the Petach Davar, this is of Ein Tnai B'Kiddushin. I gave you the front page. It's more of historical interest, like you see how he went ballistic against Rabbanei Paris. Okay, but before that, here, if you dial it in the Aruch HaShulchan, the Even Ezer Siman Kufnun Zayin Seif Yudalit. So he quotes the Ramah. The Vadai Matna Mash Al Menat Shelo Tizakek Liyibum Have Matna Mash Kutub Torah. Right? Aval Im Matna Sheim Tipol Liyibum Lo Yehei Kiddushin Chalin Ein ze matna ma shekatuv b'Torah. V'yesh ra'el hazeh mima she'amru Chazal b'yevama shenafla v'nei mukashchin de'i lav de'itita b'chol duhu neichala, right? Because tam l'meitav tandu l'meitav armalu, right? Hava amrinan da'daita hachi lo kitcha nafsha hachinami dekavate v'gam zeh she'ein tnai b'nisuin haynu b'stama. But im b'shat biyah matne b'feirush, shat biyah again, al menat kain, lo gara hatnai mishat kiddushin. And you don't need it continuously. Okay, he doesn't think you need it continuously. V'od yesh lomar, dedafka b'tnai shemesupakim yitkayem im lav, amrinan shemachal latnai be'et habiyah. Aval hacha, ein kan safek, diletovatahu hatnai, v'atnai hechreach la. Lo amrinan da'achule achle. Achule achle tnai is only if you're not sure. But here they want the tnai to be mitkayem. It's letovata. Okay. V'zesha amru b'pshitut deleka tnai b'nisuin ritzolomad having milta delo shchicha. Doesn't mean that you can't have a tnai with nisuin. It means that most of the time it doesn't work. It doesn't mean that it's impossible. Okay. So here also is a different type of tnai. The tnai is letovata. They're interested that the Tnai, he's interested that Tnai should be mitkayem, because he doesn't want her to fall before the Yavam who's a menuvel, right? Or the Yavam who's a meshumad, okay? Then he says, if Tedvav, you can see exactly, he actually gives a formulation for the Tnai, okay? Okay, so let's summarize. What do we have here? We talked about whether b'chlal it's possible to be mevatel a tnai after the fact. We saw last week that the Rush, and we saw now that the Rambam and the Ravid, they all hold you can mevatel a tnai after the fact, and that's because the maaseh, the action, is what carries the weight. The action creates the maaseh kiddushin in this case, creates the kiddushin. But the Tnai sort of holds the dot of the action from taking place. But the Tnai is something which is not part of the Ma'aseh. It's in opposition to the Ma'aseh. Okay? So when the Tnai is fulfilled, the Ma'aseh is Chal. The Tnai is not fulfilled, so we prevent the Ma'aseh from being Chal. Okay? That's why you can be Mavatel the Tnai, and according to the Rambam, you don't even need Eitot L'Kiyum HaDavar, because it's something totally separate. Okay? The Rashba holds that in principle you cannot be Mavatel a Tnai, because when you make it do a maaseh al tnai, you're basically fashioning a custom-made maaseh. This is the maaseh. It's done. Okay, so you can't be mevatel it. What you can do in dinei mamonot is say it's as if the tnai is fulfilled. That you can do. Okay. Now, so then that depends. Like, well, so what are we afraid of here in the case of mekadesh al tnai v'kinei stam? Are we afraid that he was mekadesh again? That's what the Rashba has to say. Or we're afraid that he was mochel. He was mochel the Tnai. Okay? If he's mochel the Tnai, so then you don't need Eitot L'Kiyum HaDavar, and it means she's Mekudesh L'Mafreya. If it's not Mechilat HaTnai, but it's new Kiddushin that you're concerned about, then you need Eitot L'Kiyum HaDavar, and she's only Mekudeshet Mikanu L'Haba. Okay? Then we talked about whether under what circumstances are we concerned that there's Bittul HaTnai. So the first thing, of course, is if he's machnis or boel stam, so we say maybe he's mevatel. According to the Rambam, it's a safek. Maybe he's mevatel the Tnai, okay, and she's mekudeshet in any case. But implicitly in that is if he states explicitly that he's boel or he's kones with the Tnai in mind, so the Tnai is tofes, right? And that should be good enough. Whether we need, it has to be stated bisman bi'ah, and to every subsequent bi'ah, not everybody agrees. It doesn't seem to make sense, right? But there are some people that say it needs to be every subsequent bi'ah would have to be stated, but we saw that many assume that that's not the case. That's one point in terms of stating. If you state explicitly that al smach the Tnai, so the Tnai is still tofes. And also the issue of, since Bizman Hazeh, the Kiddushin and the Nisuin at the same time, that the Nisuin is al smach the Tnai, and it does not need to be stated again. It was stated 3 minutes ago when they were standing under the chuppah. Okay? And then we talk about different type of circumstances of the Tnai, we saw that with regards to Yibum, in order to obviate Yibum and Chalitza, it was the minhag in the time of the Trusadeshin, apparently having to do with the Crusades. It was the Acharei Yom Hereg. So there were women who needed Yibum and Chalitza. So they made this takana to be Mekadesh. All the chuppahs should be al Tnai. We discussed how can that work? Why isn't there bittul al Tnai with the Nisuin? So either because Bizman Hazeh, they did, Botozman also, they already did it together, so there's no bittul al Tnai, or the person is interested in the Kiyum al Tnai, which would certainly apply today in the type of Tnai that people are talking about, right? That the husband and the wife want the Tnai to be Kayam, because we don't want to be again the woman, right? That's why we're making the Tnai, as opposed to where he wants her not to have Mumin, right? So there it's a Safek. But here he wants the Tnai to be Kayam. Or the fact that the Bilat Znut will only be Lamafreya, so maybe there's no such thing as the Bilat Znut Lamafreya, because at the time it was okay, right? So there's no Bilat Znut Lamafreya. Also because Pilega, if Pilegesh is, if there's no Isser Pilegesh, then it's not a Bilat. It wouldn't be Bilat Znut. It's at least as good, the way the Bas is at least as good as Pilegesh. Okay? All right, I think next time, all right, so next week, we have a very, no, I'm coming. She'll be talking at 6 o'clock. She's going to send me Korot, and I'll forward them on to you. I think we'll be able to begin the more in-depth discussion of Ein Adam Oseh Bilat Znut. You can already see how the whole issue of that we talked about now, how that would apply to civil marriage and as well as common law marriage. Right? When willing to say Ein Adam Oseh Bilat Znut. Okay, so that'll be next.